In a small town where dreams gather dust like old spare parts, Mike Henderson's hands tell a story of dedication. Every wrenched turn in his struggling garage is a prayer for survival. Every repair, a fight against mounting bills. He's the kind of mechanic who treats every car like it matters, even when his own world is falling apart. On a rain-soaked Tuesday, a sleek Mercedes breaks down outside his shop. Its driver, a woman in an impeccable suit, watches silently as Mike works his magic, never suspecting that this simple repair will change both their lives forever. What begins as a chance encounter is about to become an extraordinary journey. Could a struggling mechanic's act of kindness be the key that unlocks a future beyond his wildest dreams? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The stack of bills on Mike Henderson's desk had grown tall enough to cast shadows in the early morning light. He thumbed through them with oil-stained fingers. Electricity, supplies, mortgage, insurance, each one a reminder of promises harder to keep with each passing month. The red final notice stamps were becoming as familiar as the grease stains. On his work shirts, "Dad, the coffee's ready." Sarah's voice cut through his worries. At 17, she already carried herself with the quiet strength of her mother. She set the chipped mug beside him, careful not to disturb the precarious tower of paperwork. "Thanks, sweetheart." Mike managed a smile, quickly sliding the bills into his drawer. Sarah didn't need to carry the weight of their financial struggles, not when she should be focused on her college applications. The morning sun filtered through the garage's dusty windows, catching the faded sign that read, "Henderson's Auto Repair, quality work at fair prices." His father had painted that sign 40 years ago, back when the shop was new and hope came easier than debt. The familiar scent of motor oil and coffee filled the small office as Mike booted up the ancient computer, its fan whirring like a tired engine. A photo of Claire, taken just months before the cancer took her, watched over him from its scratched frame. Sometimes he swore he could still hear her laugh echoing through the garage, telling him to stop worrying so much. "I'm trying, honey," he whispered to the photo. "I'm really trying." The day started like any other. Old Mr. Peterson brought in his '85 Buick for its monthly tune-up, paying what he could with his pension check. Mike never had the heart to charge him full price, not after 40 years of loyalty. Mrs. Rodriguez came by with her minivan's squealing brakes, another payment plan he'd work out somehow. "Sarah, can you hand me the 3/8 socket?" Mike called. From under Mrs. Rodriguez's van, the tools were a language they shared, passed down through generations. Sarah could name every tool in the shop by age 12, just like Mike had learned from his father. "Here," she said, the tool appearing in his outstretched hand. "Dad?" The guidance counselor asked about application fees today. Mike's wrench slipped, his knuckles scraping against metal. The college application fees, another expense he'd been trying not to think about. "We'll figure it out, sweetheart. Maybe we can—" The phone's ring interrupted him. Sarah answered with the professional tone she'd perfected over years of helping at the shop. "Henderson's Auto Repair. How can we help you today?" Mike rolled out from under the van, watching his daughter's face as she took notes. She was so much like Claire. Same determined set to her jaw, same careful way of listening. The thought of not being able to give her the future she deserved kept him up at night. The morning wore on, a parade of familiar faces and familiar problems. Mike fixed what he could, negotiated payment plans for what people couldn't afford, and tried not to think about his own dwindling bank account. Each repair was a small victory in a larger battle he wasn't sure he could win. During lunch, Sarah spread her college brochures across the breakroom table, eyes bright with possibilities. Engineering programs, robotics labs, futures that seemed a world away from their small-town garage. "MIT has this amazing automotive engineering program," she said, pointing to glossy photos of high-tech labs. "They're doing things with electric vehicles that could change everything," Mike nodded, his sandwich forgotten. Claire had always said Sarah would outgrow their small town, just like she had dreamed of doing. He just hadn't expected it to feel like this, like watching a bird prepare to fly while knowing you couldn't provide the wind beneath its wings. The afternoon brought Gary Wheeler's truck, coughing and sputtering its way into the bay. Gary, laid off from the factory last month, looked as worn down as his vehicle. "Just tell me it's not the transmission, Mike," Gary pleaded, hands deep in empty pockets. Mike spent an extra hour diagnosing the problem, finding a workaround that would keep Gary on the road without breaking him financially. It wasn't the first time he'd cut his own profits to help a neighbor, and it wouldn't be the last. That's what his father had taught him. In a small town, community meant more than commerce. As the day wound down, Mike sat at his desk, adding up the day's receipts against the month's bills. The numbers refused to align, like mismatched gears grinding against each other. Sarah had already gone home to study, leaving him alone with his calculations and Claire's watchful gaze from the photo. "I don't know how much longer I can keep this going," he admitted to the empty office. The reply came in the form of distant thunder, a storm rolling in from the west. He hadn't known then that it would bring more than rain, that tomorrow's Mercedes would carry with it a chance to change everything. For now, though, Mike did what he'd always done. He locked up the garage, checked each bay door twice, and walked home through the gathering dusk. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own opportunities. All he could do was face them with the same dedication he brought to every repair, every promise, every dream he still held for his daughter's future. The Mercedes-Benz S-Class wasn't the kind of car Mike usually saw in his shop. Its sleek black surface, even dulled by rain, spoke of boardrooms and business deals, not small-town mechanics. The sound of its engine struggling against itself made him wince. Expensive cars had expensive problems. The woman who stepped out managed to look immaculate despite the weather, her charcoal suit crisp under a black umbrella. A diamond-studded watch caught the fluorescent light as she extended her hand. "Catherine Pierce, I'm hoping you can help me." Mike wiped his hands on his shop rag before shaking hers. "Mike Henderson. What seems to be the problem, Miss Pierce?" "Please, call me Catherine." She gestured to the car. It started making an unusual noise about 10 miles back. Then the check engine light came on, and the steering began to feel heavy. Mike nodded, already moving toward the car. "Mind if I take a look?" "By all means." Catherine stepped back, watching as he opened the hood. Her posture suggested someone used to being in control, now forced to rely on others. The engine compartment was a marvel of German engineering, everything arranged with precise purpose. Mike's experienced hands moved methodically, checking connections, testing responses. "When was the last time you had it serviced?" 3 months ago at the dealership in Chicago. She checked her watch, the kind that cost more than Mike's annual mortgage payments. "I have a meeting in Portland tomorrow morning. Is this something that can be fixed quickly?" Mike straightened up, wiping his hands again. "The good news is, I can fix it. The bad news is it's not a quick fix. You've got a failing power steering pump and it's starting to affect other systems. These models, they're all connected. One problem cascades into others if you don't catch it early." Catherine's expression remained neutral, but her fingers tightened slightly on her phone. "How long?" "Done right? 6, maybe 7 hours. I'd need to get some parts, but I know a supplier who can have them here in an hour." The dealership quoted me 3 days when I called them. That's because they replace everything in the system at once. Sometimes that's necessary, but in this case, Mike patted the car's fender, she just needs someone to understand what's really wrong, not what the computer says should be wrong. Something shifted in Catherine's expression. Interest, perhaps, or recognition of something familiar. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Do it right, Mr. Henderson. Time isn't as pressing as I implied." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Your meeting in Portland?" A slight smile touched her lips. "Can be rescheduled. Some things are more important than keeping to a schedule. As Mike began his work, Catherine settled into the small waiting area, pulling out a laptop. Occasionally, he caught her watching him work, her gaze analytical rather than impatient. She asked questions, intelligent ones about the repair process, the car's systems, his diagnostic approach. You treat it like a puzzle to be solved, she observed during one of his explanations. Not just a set of parts to be replaced, Mike smiled, hands deep in the engine compartment. Every car tells a story if you know how to listen. This one's telling me it's been pushed hard, but maintained well, like someone who works too much but still makes time for the gym. Catherine's laugh was unexpected and genuine, an apt analogy. She stood, stretching subtly. Is there somewhere nearby I could get coffee? Sarah, Mike called out. His daughter appeared from the office. Would you mind showing Ms. Pierce to Joe's? Best coffee in town. Of course. Sarah grabbed an umbrella. It's just down the street. They make amazing cherry pie, too. As they left, Mike returned to his work, but his mind kept turning over the morning's events. There was something about Catherine Pierce that didn't quite add up. Her car, her clothes, her manner, they all suggested wealth and position. Yet here she was, in his small-town garage, choosing a local mechanic over a dealership. When she returned an hour later carrying an extra coffee which she handed to him without ceremony, the mystery only deepened. She changed into more casual clothes, though still clearly expensive, and settled back into the waiting area with a stack of files. The pie was excellent, she said. As was the conversation with your daughter. She's quite knowledgeable about automotive engineering for someone her age. Pride warmed Mike's voice. She's been helping in the shop since she could walk, has her heart set on MIT's engineering program. A worthy ambition. Catherine's tone held something more than casual interest. And you? What ambitions drive you? Mr. Henderson? Mike's hands stilled on the wrench. It was a deceptively simple question, one that probed at thoughts he usually kept buried. These days? Making sure she gets there. Beyond that, he shrugged, returning to his work. I just try to do good work, help where I can. Admirable goals, Catherine murmured, more to herself than to him. She returned to her files, but Mike could feel her attention shift occasionally back to his work, measuring him against some private standard he couldn't see. The repair progressed steadily, each step methodical and precise. As the afternoon wore on, Mike found himself explaining more of his process, encouraged by Catherine's genuine interest. She asked about his experience, his training, his approach to problem-solving. The conversations felt oddly like an interview, though for what position he couldn't imagine. When he finally closed the hood, 7 hours after she'd first arrived, the engine purred like new. Catherine stood beside him as he ran through the final checks, her expression thoughtful. How much do I owe you? She asked, reaching for her purse. Mike handed her the invoice, significantly lower than what a dealership would have charged. She studied it for a moment, then wrote a check for twice the amount. Ms. Pierce, this is too much. It's exactly right for the quality of work and time you've invested. She held up a hand to stop his protest. Consider it an investment in excellence, Mr. Henderson. Those are rarer than you might think. As she drove away, the Mercedes's engine running smooth as silk, Mike couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had just happened. He just wasn't sure what. Long after Sarah had gone home for the night, Mike remained hunched over the Mercedes engine. The overhead lights cast deep shadows across the garage, but his hands moved with practiced certainty. A worn family photo on his desk caught his eye. Himself, much younger, working alongside his father on their first restoration project. The old man's words echoed in his memory. The difference between a mechanic and a craftsman is knowing when the job's really done, not just when the customer thinks it's done. The power steering pump had been the obvious problem, but Mike's decades of experience had taught him to look deeper. His fingers traced the serpentine belt's path, testing tension and alignment. There, a slight vibration that most wouldn't notice, but could develop into something serious down the road. Might as well do it right, he muttered to himself, reaching for his tools. The belt tensioner showed subtle signs of wear that wouldn't appear in any diagnostic report. It wasn't part of the original repair quote, but Mike knew he couldn't let it go. Not when he could prevent a future breakdown. His phone buzzed, a text from Sarah. "Dad, don't forget to eat something. Left sandwich in the fridge. Love you." Mike smiled, his heart warming at his daughter's thoughtfulness. She'd inherited her mother's caring nature along with her sharp mind. Claire had always made sure he took care of himself during long nights at the shop too. The sandwich would have to wait. Mike had noticed something else while checking the tensioner. Signs of wear in the coolant hoses. They weren't critical yet, but in a high-performance vehicle like this, not yet could quickly become too late. "Your owner's been pushing you hard, hasn't she?" He spoke softly to the car, a habit he'd developed over years of late-night repairs. Each vehicle had its own story to tell, if you knew how to read the signs. This one spoke of long highway miles, quick accelerations, someone always in a hurry but mindful enough to maintain the basics. As he worked, Mike's mind wandered to Catherine Pierce. There was something different about her, not just the obvious wealth, but the way she'd watched him work. Most customers her type wanted things done quickly, caring more about convenience than quality. She'd seemed to understand the value of doing things properly. The clock ticked past midnight as Mike meticulously replaced the coolant hoses. He'd have to eat the cost of the extra parts, but he couldn't bring himself to do it any other way. His father had built this shop's reputation on going the extra mile, on fixing what needed fixing before it became a problem. That legacy meant more than money. He thought about Sarah's college applications, about the stack of bills in his drawer. Common sense said he should focus on what was quoted, get paid, and move on to the next job. But common sense had never been the Henderson way of doing things. A memory surfaced, his father teaching him to rebuild his first transmission, patient hands guiding young fingers through complex machinery. "People trust us with more than their cars, son. They trust us with their safety, their families, their livelihoods. That trust is worth more than gold." Mike straightened, stretching his tired back. The engine compartment now looked as pristine as it had leaving the factory. Every connection checked, every potential issue addressed. He'd even cleaned and treated the leather engine covers, a small detail most wouldn't notice, but it mattered to him. Sarah's sandwich finally called to him from the break room fridge. As he ate, he wrote detailed notes about the additional work he'd done, the potential issues he'd prevented. Catherine Pierce seemed like someone who'd appreciate thoroughness, even if she didn't want to pay for the extras. The photo on his desk caught his eye again. His father would have understood these late hours, this compulsion to do things right. The old man had never made much money, but he'd earned something more valuable: respect, trust, a legacy of quality that still lived in every tool and technique he'd passed down. Mike gathered his tools, wiping each one clean before returning it to its proper place. Tomorrow would come too soon, bringing its own challenges and repairs. But for now, he could look at the Mercedes and know he'd done right by it, by his father's memory and by his own standards. As he locked up the garage, the night air cool. On his tired face, Mike felt that familiar satisfaction of a job well done. It might not pay the bills or guarantee Sarah's college future, but it was something he could hold on to. A craft passed down, a standard maintained, a promise kept. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when Mike heard it, a deep, rhythmic thumping that made the tools on his wall rattle. He stepped outside the garage, squinting against the light as the sound grew louder. A dark shape emerged from the glare, casting a massive shadow across the parking lot. Sarah burst out of the office. "Dad, is that a helicopter?" Mike finished, watching in disbelief as the sleek black aircraft descended toward the empty lot next door. The downdraft kicked up dust and scattered loose papers, forcing them to shield their eyes. The logo on the helicopter's tail caught the morning light. Pierce Innovation Technologies. As the rotors slowed, a familiar figure emerged. Catherine Pierce looked even more commanding than before, her business suit replaced by tailored aviation pants and a leather jacket. She walked toward them with purposeful strides, followed by a man carrying a briefcase. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson," she called out, as casual as if she'd arrived by car. "I trust I'm not interrupting anything too crucial?" Mike found his voice. "Just routine maintenance. Miss Pierce, this is quite an entrance." "Please, Catherine." "And yes, I suppose it is." She gestured to her companion. "This is James Chen, my chief legal counsel. I believe we have something important to discuss." Sarah started to excuse herself, but Catherine stopped her. "Actually, I'd like you to stay, Sarah. This concerns you too." They gathered in Mike's small office, Catherine seemingly unbothered by the modest surroundings. She settled into the creaky client chair while James arranged documents on the cluttered desk. "First," Catherine began, "I want to thank you again for yesterday's work. My team examined the car this morning, quite thoroughly, I might add. They were impressed, particularly by the preventative measures you took that weren't on the invoice." Mike shifted uncomfortably. "About that, I should have asked before doing the extra work." "That's exactly why I'm here." Catherine leaned forward, her expression intense. "Do you know what my company does, Mr. Henderson? Something with technology, judging by the name. We're developing the next generation of electric vehicles, not just cars, an entirely new approach to personal transportation. But we've hit a wall." She stood, pacing the small space. "Our engineers are brilliant with theory, with software, with cutting-edge technology, but they're missing something crucial, something you demonstrated yesterday. I don't follow. You see machines the way they really are, not just how they appear on paper. You understand their soul, for lack of a better word." She smiled at Sarah. "Your daughter mentioned your reputation for fixing the unfixable. Gase's other shops turn away." Mike glanced at Sarah, who looked both excited and nervous. "It's just experience, paying attention to the details." "It's more than that," Catherine insisted. "It's intuition built on decades of hands-on knowledge. It's understanding not just how things work, but why they fail and, more importantly, how to prevent those failures." She nodded to James, who opened his briefcase. "I'm offering you a position, Mr. Henderson, Head of Practical Innovation at Pierce Technologies. We need someone who can bridge the gap between theoretical design and real-world application, someone who can teach our young engineers the things they can't learn in textbooks." Mike stared at the contract James placed before him. The salary figure made his heart skip, more money than he'd make in 5 years at the garage. "There's more," Catherine continued. "Full college scholarship for Sarah at any university she chooses. A housing allowance in Portland, and—" She paused, making sure she had his full attention. "We'll buy your garage, transform it into a training center for young mechanics. You can still oversee it, teach here when you're not at the main facility." Sarah grabbed her father's arm, barely containing her excitement. But Mike's voice was steady when he spoke. "Why me? You must have access to hundreds of qualified mechanics." "Mechanics, yes. But yesterday I watched you solve problems that weren't even problems yet. I saw someone who treats every job as if it were for family." Catherine's eyes met his. "That kind of integrity, that dedication to doing things right. You can't teach that in a classroom, but you can build a company's foundation on it." The morning sun slanted through the dusty windows, illuminating the family photo on Mike's desk. His father's words echoed in his mind. Sometimes opportunities don't just knock, they break down the door. Catherine stood, straightening her jacket. "Take some time to think about it. Review the contract with your own lawyer. But know this, I don't make offers like this lightly. You have something my company needs, Mr. Henderson. The question is, are you ready for a bigger garage?" The helicopter's shadow stretched across the parking lot like the hand of fate, waiting for an answer. The Pierce Innovation Technologies campus stretched across 30 acres of Portland's outskirts, its buildings a harmony of glass and sustainable. Materials. Mike pressed his weathered hands against the helicopter's window, taking in the scope of it all. 3 days had passed since Catherine's offer, and now he was seeing firsthand what he might be part of. Impressive, isn't it? Catherine sat across from him, watching his reaction. But I want to show you something specific. Pilot, take us to Building 7. The helicopter banked smoothly, circling a massive structure with curved solar panels for a roof. As they landed, Mike spotted dozens of vehicles in various stages of development through the building's transparent walls. Some looked like cars from science fiction movies, others were barely more than sophisticated frameworks. Our innovation center, Catherine explained as they walked through automated doors. Where theory meets reality, or at least where it's supposed to. The interior was an engineer's dream come true. Advanced diagnostic equipment lined the walls, and robotic arms moved with precise purpose above testing stations. Young engineers in lab coats hurried about, their tablets displaying complex schematics, but it was the blueprint spread across the central table that caught Mike's eye. He approached it without thinking, drawn by the elegant complexity of the design. "This is your flagship project?" he asked, fingers tracing the power distribution system. Catherine nodded. "The Phoenix Initiative, an entirely new approach to electric vehicles, 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, 1,000-mile range, fully autonomous capabilities." She paused. "And a persistent tendency to overheat under real-world conditions." Mike studied the design more closely. The solution seemed obvious to him, almost too obvious. "Your cooling system. It's perfect on paper, but..." "But?" Catherine prompted. "But you're thinking like engineers, not mechanics. Look," he pointed, "to several junctions. Heat doesn't follow blueprints. It finds the path of least resistance. In the real world, these junctions will create hotspots that your sensors might miss until it's too late." A young engineer nearby looked up, frowning. "Our simulations can't account for everything," Mike finished. "Cars aren't just numbers on a screen. They're living things in a way. They flex, they vibrate, they develop personalities of their own." Catherine's smile grew as she watched him work through the problem. "This is exactly why we need you, Mr. Henderson. Theory and practice working together." She gestured around the facility. "All this technology is meaningless if we can't make it work in the real world." They toured the rest of the building, each section revealing new wonders. A virtual reality design room where engineers could walk through their creations before they were built. A materials lab developing new alloys and composites. A massive testing chamber that could simulate any weather condition on Earth. "And this," Catherine said, stopping before a secure door, "is what I really wanted you to see." The room beyond was smaller, more focused. A single vehicle sat in the center, its sleek lines unlike anything Mike had ever seen. It looked less like a car and more like a sculpture, its surface seeming to flow like liquid metal. "Project Legacy," Catherine announced, "our attempt to revolutionize not just how cars work, but how people think about transportation itself." She ran her hand along the vehicle's surface. "And it's completely stalled." Mike circled the car slowly, taking in every detail. "What's the problem?" "Everything works perfectly in testing, but when we try to integrate all the systems..." She shrugged. "It's like the car itself is fighting us. We've had 3 different engineering teams try to solve it." Without being asked, Mike popped the access panel. The technology inside was beyond anything he'd worked with. But the principles, the way things flowed and worked together, those were universal. "Your engineers," he said slowly, "they're trying to force everything to work according to specifications. But sometimes," he reached in, feeling the connection points, the way components sat in relation to each other. "Sometimes you have to let the machine tell you what it needs." For the next hour, Mike lost himself in the work. He asked questions about systems he didn't understand, but more importantly, he listened to the subtle sounds, the way things fit, the story the machine was trying to tell. Catherine watched silently, her expression thoughtful. Finally, Mike straightened up. You've got something revolutionary here, but you're fighting against basic mechanical principles. It's like, he searched for the right words, it's like trying to teach someone to dance by explaining physics. You need to feel the rhythm, not just understand the movements. Catherine's eyes lit up. Can you fix it? Better. Mike pulled out his worn notebook, sketching quickly. I can show your team how to stop fighting it, how to work with the machine's natural tendencies instead of against them. The blueprint of his solution was rough, marked with grease-stained fingerprints, but as he explained his ideas, the young engineers gathered around. Their initial skepticism gave way to growing excitement as they recognized the elegance of his practical approach. Sometimes, Mike concluded, the best innovation isn't inventing something new. It's understanding what's trying to happen naturally and helping it along. Catherine placed a hand on his shoulder. Still think you're just a small-town mechanic? Mr. Henderson? Mike looked around the room at the cutting-edge technology, the eager young faces, the possibilities waiting to be unlocked. For the first time, he let himself really consider the future she was offering. No, he said quietly, I'm starting to see something bigger. The acceptance letter from MIT lay on the kitchen table between them, its official letterhead gleaming. Under the overhead light, Sarah hadn't opened it yet. She'd been waiting for her father to come home from his tour of Pierce Technologies. Full scholarship, Mike said quietly, studying the financial aid package Catherine had provided. Not just tuition, everything. Dad, Sarah's voice wavered. This is incredible, but I know how much the garage means to you. Grandpa's legacy. Your grandfather's legacy isn't the garage, Mike interrupted, thinking of all the lessons his father had taught him. It's doing what's right, taking care of people, never settling for good enough. He smiled. And maybe it's time for that legacy to evolve. Sarah picked up the MIT letter, turning it over in her hands. Mrs. Rodriguez came by today. She was crying when I told her you might be leaving. The words hit Mike like a physical blow. He thought of his loyal customers, the people who depended on him, the community he'd served for decades. Catherine says they'll keep the garage open, he said. Turn it into a training center. Help young mechanics learn the trade. Maybe even create apprenticeship programs. It won't be the same. No, Mike agreed. It'll be different. Maybe even better. He reached across the table, taking his daughter's hand. Remember what Mom used to say about change? Sarah's eyes welled up. Sometimes the scariest changes lead to the most beautiful destinations. She squeezed his hand. She'd want you to take this opportunity, wouldn't she? Mike's gaze drifted to the photo of Claire on the wall, her smile as bright and encouraging as ever. She always said we were meant for more than this small town. I just didn't think it would happen like this. The phone rang. Gary Wheeler, his truck making strange noises again. Mike's first instinct was to tell him to bring it by tomorrow, but he caught himself. Soon he might not be here to help. The thing is, he said after hanging up, I keep thinking about what Catherine showed me today. The technology they're developing, the problems they're trying to solve. If I could help make those innovations work better, more reliably, he trailed off, considering the implications. I might be able to help more people than I ever could, one car at a time. Sarah finally opened her MIT acceptance letter, her hands trembling slightly. As she read, her smile grew wider. They have a cooperative program with major tech companies. She looked up at her father. Including Pierce Technologies. Mike laughed. Catherine thinks of everything, doesn't she? She believes in you, Dad, like Mom did, like I do. Sarah stood, moving around the table to hug him. And this way, we wouldn't be so far apart. The weight of the decision settled around them like a comfortable blanket. Mike thought about the amazing things he'd seen today, the enthusiasm of the young engineers, the problems waiting to be solved. He thought about his father's lessons, his wife's dreams, his daughter's future. You know, what the hardest part is, he said softly. For the first time in years, I'm excited about what comes next. And that feels almost like betraying your mother's memory, moving on. Sarah pulled back, her expression serious. Mum would kick your butt for thinking that way. She'd be the first one packing boxes and making plans. Mike had to laugh, because it was true. Claire had always been the adventurous one, pushing him to grow, to try new things. In a way, this opportunity felt like her final gift to him, a chance to become more than he'd imagined possible. He stood, walking to the window. The sun was setting behind the garage, casting long shadows across the lot where he'd spent so much of his life. Each oil stain, each worn patch of concrete held a memory, but maybe it was time to make new memories, to write a new chapter in the Henderson legacy. "You're right," he said finally. "Your mother would kick my butt. And then she'd tell me to stop being afraid of happiness." Sarah joined him at the window, her MIT acceptance letter still clutched in her hand. Together, they watched the day fade into twilight, standing on the threshold of change. "So," Sarah said, "should I tell Catherine we're in?" Mike thought of the Phoenix Project, of young engineers eager to learn, of a future filled with possibilities. He thought of his father's wisdom and his wife's courage, and he knew what he had to do. "Yeah," he said, putting his arm around his daughter. "Tell her we're ready for that bigger garage." Mike stood in the garage before dawn, running his fingers over the old key ring. Each key had its own story. The front door key, worn smooth from decades of use. The storage room key with its blue paint chip. The key to his father's old filing cabinet, still pristine after all these years. In the quiet morning hours, these small pieces of metal felt heavier than any tool he'd ever lifted. "I thought I'd find you here early," Sarah said from the doorway. She was holding 2 cups of coffee from Joe's, their last morning ritual in the old shop. "Just wanted some time," Mike replied, accepting the coffee. "One last quiet morning before everyone shows up." Catherine had arranged a proper send-off, a community gathering to announce the garage's transformation into the Henderson Technical Training Center. But first, Mike needed this moment alone with the ghosts of his past. He walked through the familiar space, touching each tool, each piece of equipment. His father's old diagnostic kit, outdated but still reliable. The creeper he'd used to teach Sarah about brake systems. The dent in the wall from his first attempt at running the shop alone. "Remember when I crashed Mrs. Peterson's bike in here?" Sarah asked, pointing to a scrape on the floor. "I was so scared you'd be mad," Mike smiled. "I was just grateful you weren't hurt. Your mother, though, she gave me hell for leaving the bike where you could reach it." They continued their walk through the memories, each corner holding a story. The workbench, where Mike had helped countless neighbors keep their vehicles running. The office desk, where Claire used to do the books, insisting on paper records even as computers took over the world. A knock at the door interrupted their reverie. Old Mr. Peterson stood outside, his '85 Buick idling roughly in the lot. "Thought I'd get one last tune-up before you go," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Can't trust anyone else with my girl here." Mike's throat tightened. "Come on in, Joe, one last time." As he worked on the Buick, more customers began arriving. Mrs. Rodriguez brought homemade tamales. Gary Wheeler arrived with his perpetually troubled truck and a photo album of all the cars Mike had kept running over the years. Each person carried not just their vehicle's needs, but their memories, their gratitude. By mid-morning, the lot was full. Catherine arrived, not by helicopter this time, but in the Mercedes that had started it all. She stayed in the background, respectfully allowing the community their time to say goodbye. "Attention, everyone," Mike called out, standing by his toolbox. "I know change isn't easy. Believe me, I know. But this shop, it's always been about more than just fixing cars. It's been about helping people, about passing on knowledge." He gestured to the blueprint Catherine's team had prepared, showing the garage's future as a training center. "That's not going to change. In fact, we're going to help more people than ever. Every student who comes through here will learn the same values my father taught me, that integrity matters, that doing things right matters, that people matter." Sarah appeared at his side, holding a small wooden box. Inside lay the original key to the garage, the one his father had given him 30 years ago. "Dad," she said softly, "I think it's time." Mike lifted the key, its brass surface catching the morning light. Catherine stepped forward, her expression solemn. "Mr. Henderson, would you do the honors?" He walked to the main entrance, where a new sign waited to be unveiled. With steady hands, he unlocked the past and opened the door to the future. The canvas fell away, revealing gleaming letters. Henderson Technical Training Center, where tradition meets innovation. "This key," Mike announced, his voice carrying across the hushed crowd, "has opened this door over 10,000 times. It's welcomed people seeking help, seeking knowledge, seeking a friend." He turned to Catherine. "Will you make sure it continues to do that?" "You have my word," she replied, "and my gratitude." The morning sun streamed through the open bay doors, illuminating decades of oil stains and memories. Mike looked at the gathered faces, his customers, his friends, his community. They weren't just saying goodbye to a mechanic, they were witnessing the evolution of a legacy. "The shop's changing," he said finally, "but its heart isn't, and neither is mine." He pocketed his old keys, keeping them close. "Sometimes the best way to honor the past is to build a better future." As the crowd mingled, sharing stories and well wishes, Mike took one last walk through his domain. Each step felt like turning a page, closing one chapter but beginning another. The tools would find new hands, the bays would welcome new challenges, and the Henderson name would continue to stand for excellence. It wasn't an ending after all. It was a transmission, passing on power, knowledge, and hope to the next generation. Mike stared at the sleek toolbox on his new workstation, its pristine surface reflecting the morning light streaming through the glass walls of Pierce Technologies. The tools inside were a masterpiece of engineering, precision instruments that cost more than his old garage's monthly revenue. They were beautiful, perfect, and completely foreign to his calloused hands. "Having second thoughts?" Catherine asked, appearing beside him, just adjusting. He lifted a digital torque wrench, its display glowing with options he'd never seen before. "Quite different from my old socket set. Consider it your welcome gift, though," she smiled, gesturing to the worn leather tool roll he'd brought from home. "I suspect you'll still prefer your own." A group of young engineers hovered nearby, trying to look busy while stealing glances at their new colleague. Their crisp lab coats and tablets created a sharp contrast to Mike's work shirt and steel-toed boots. "Team," Catherine called out, "come meet Mike Henderson, our new head of practical innovation." They gathered around, a mix of curiosity and skepticism in their expressions. The youngest, barely older than Sarah, stepped forward first. "Dr. Emily Chen," she introduced herself. "I've been leading the thermal management team on Project Phoenix." "Just Mike," he replied, shaking her hand. "And I remember your work from my tour. Impressive calculations on the cooling system. But you said they wouldn't work in real-world conditions," another engineer interjected. "Marcus Webb, power distribution." "Not exactly." Mike pulled out his notebook, flipping to his sketches from the previous visit. "I said they needed to account for real-world variables. There's a difference." He spread the drawings across his workstation, and the team gathered closer. For the next hour, Mike walked them through his observations, translating decades of hands-on experience into terms they could understand. Gradually, their skepticism gave way to engagement. "See here?" He pointed to a junction in their design. "Your math is perfect, but metal doesn't just follow equations. It expands, contracts, develops hotspots. You have to give it room to breathe." Emily leaned in, tablet forgotten. "Like leaving expansion gaps in railroad tracks?" "Exactly," Mike smiled. "Cars are living things in their way. They need space to move, to settle into their natural rhythms." Catherine watched from the doorway as the impromptu lesson evolved into a genuine exchange of ideas. The young engineer's theoretical knowledge began meshing with Mike's practical experience, creating something new. "Mr. Henderson," Marcus called from Project Legacy's bay. Could you look at something? Mike walked over, still self-conscious in the high-tech environment. The prototype vehicle sat silent, its advanced systems temporarily dormant. We've been struggling with this vibration during acceleration, Marcus explained. The diagnostics show nothing wrong, but you can feel it, Mike finished. At Marcus's nod, he laid his hand on the vehicle's surface. Sometimes the most important diagnostic tool is right here. He patted his palm. Start her up. The electric motors hummed to life. A sound unlike any conventional engine. Mike closed his eyes, letting his hands tell him the story. Decades of experience translated the subtle vibrations into understanding. You're mounting points, he said finally. They're too rigid. You're fighting the motor's natural frequency instead of working with it. Emily was already pulling up the design specs. But the computer models show what should happen in a perfect world, Mike finished. But we don't live in a perfect world. We live in one where tiny imperfections add up, where materials have memory, where theory meets reality. For the rest of the morning, Mike moved between projects, asking questions as often as answering them. Each challenge was a puzzle, combining the team's cutting-edge knowledge with his own hard-won wisdom. During lunch, Catherine found him in the break room, staring out at the campus grounds. "How are you really doing?" she asked. Mike considered the question. "It's like learning a new language. I know what I want to say, just not always how to say it in their terms." "That's exactly why you're here." She sat across from him. "We have plenty of people who speak the language of theory. We need someone who speaks the language of experience." He nodded toward his old tool roll, now resting beside the new toolbox. "Good thing some skills translate across any language." "They're already learning to listen," Catherine observed. "Did you notice how quiet Marcus got when you diagnosed that vibration issue?" Mike smiled. "He reminds me of Sarah, actually. Brilliant, but willing to learn new ways of seeing things." The afternoon brought more challenges, more opportunities, to bridge the gap between theory and practice. With each successful collaboration, the invisible barrier between the old mechanic and the young engineers grew a little thinner. By day's end, Mike's pristine toolbox showed its first signs of use. A few fingerprints, a minor scratch. Like him, it was beginning to adapt to its new purpose, finding its place in this world of glass and innovation. The Innovation Award sat on Mike's workstation, its crystal surface catching the morning light. For outstanding contribution to project, Phoenix read the engraving, followed by his name. 2 months into his new role, and already he'd revolutionized their approach to thermal management. "You should display it properly," Emily said, approaching with fresh diagnostic reports. "Not just leave it lying around like a paperweight." Mike chuckled, moving the award aside to examine the data. "Seems strange getting awards for something that just makes sense, like getting a medal for breathing." But his solution had been far from obvious to the engineering team. They'd spent months fighting the heat distribution issues in the new electric drive system, trying increasingly complex solutions. Mike's breakthrough came from an unexpected source, his experience with old-school radiator systems. "Have you seen the latest efficiency numbers?" Emily spread the reports across his workstation. "Your biomimetic cooling channels improved performance by 38%. Nature figured it out long before we did," Mike replied, studying the results. "Tree branches, blood vessels, river deltas, they all follow the same patterns for a reason." The project had started with a late-night conversation 3 weeks ago. Mike had been studying the thermal imaging results, reminded of something he'd seen countless times in conventional engines. "You're trying to force the heat to follow your designated paths," he'd told the team. "But heat, like water, finds its own way." So instead of fighting it, he'd sketched out a system inspired by natural circulation patterns, combining the team's advanced materials with designs that had evolved over millions of years. The engineers were skeptical at first, but the prototype results spoke for themselves. Catherine appeared in the doorway, followed by several executives in suits. Mike, do you have a moment? The board would like to see the Phoenix prototype. As they gathered around the vehicle, Mike found himself translating complex engineering concepts into simple, practical terms. He'd discovered a talent for bridging the gap between technical innovation and real-world application. What Mr. Henderson has created, Catherine explained to the board members, is more than just a cooling system. It's a new way of approaching problem-solving across all our projects. One of the executives, a former engineer himself, peered at the design specs. This is remarkably elegant. How did you arrive at this solution? Honestly? Mike ran his hand along the prototype's smooth surface. I thought about how a tree moves water from its roots to its leaves. Nature's had a long time to perfect these patterns. We just had to learn to see them. The revelation had come to him while fixing his neighbor's garden fountain back home. Watching the water find efficient paths through the rocks had triggered a memory of heat patterns in engine blocks. The connection between natural flow and mechanical efficiency suddenly seemed obvious. The real breakthrough, Emily added, pulling up simulation data, is how adaptable this system is. We're already applying the principles to power distribution and structural support. Mike watched the young engineer present their findings with pride. She'd been the first to grasp the implications of his concept, helping translate his practical insights into technical specifications. Their collaboration had become a model for the entire department. I understand you've been mentoring some of our junior engineers, another board member noted. More like mutual education, Mike replied. They teach me the theory, I show them the practical applications. It's amazing what happens when you combine book learning with hands-on experience. Later, after the executives had left, Catherine lingered at his workstation. The board is impressed. They want to fast-track several patents based on your innovations. Mike picked up the Crystal Award, still somewhat amazed by the turn his life had taken. Patents. I'm just solving problems the way I always have. That's exactly why you're so valuable. Catherine smiled. You see solutions where others see only problems. Speaking of which, she handed him a folder. The training center renovation is complete. Would you like to see what they've done with your old garage? The photos showed a transformed space, modern equipment alongside traditional tools, classroom areas next to working bays. But they'd kept the old sign, his father's handiwork now restored and hanging proudly above the entrance. First class of students starts next month, Catherine continued. We thought you might want to give the opening lecture. Mike studied the photos, thinking of all the lessons he'd learned in that space. From fixing cars to teaching the next generation of innovators. Dad would never believe it. I think he'd be proud, Catherine said softly. You're not just preserving his legacy, you're building on it. The award caught the light again, sending rainbow patterns across his workstation. Each one seemed to represent a different path that had led him here. His father's teachings, his own experience, his willingness to embrace change. And now, his unexpected talent for innovation. Mike stood in the kitchen of his new home, turning the house keys over in his hand. The morning sun streamed through windows, twice the size of his old ones, illuminating a space that still felt more like a magazine photo than his actual life. 3 months into his new position, and some mornings he still had to remind himself, it wasn't all a dream. Dad, have you seen the acceptance package MIT sent? Sarah burst in, waving a thick envelope. They want me to start in their advanced engineering program this summer. What happened to taking a break before college? He pulled her into a hug, even as his heart squeezed at the thought of her leaving sooner than planned. That was before. Pierce Technologies offered the internship to go along with it. She grinned. I could be working on Project Phoenix with you during breaks. The thought of his daughter following both their dreams, her mother's ambition and his practical skills combined, filled him with a pride that almost hurt. Mom would be doing cartwheels, he said softly. She is, Dad. Somewhere, she definitely is. The house, Catherine had insisted on calling it a residence, was in an upscale Portland neighborhood, close enough to both Pierce Technologies and Sarah's future internship. The move had been overwhelming at first, but like everything else, in his new life, Mike was learning to adapt. His phone buzzed, a text from Emily about a breakthrough in the power distribution system. These days, his mornings started with engineering updates instead of emergency repair calls. Yet he still kept his old work boots by the door, still carried his father's worn leather tool roll alongside the high-tech equipment. "You're going to be late for your meeting," Sarah called out, checking his schedule on the smart home display, another adjustment he was still getting used to. "It's with Catherine," he replied, gathering his things. "She understands." Their relationship had evolved over the past months, shifting from mentor and recruit to something closer to true colleagues. She valued his insights not just on technical matters, but on building the culture she wanted for her company. The doorbell rang, a sound he still didn't recognize as his own. A delivery man stood outside with a large package. "Sign here, Mr. Henderson." Inside was a beautiful scale model of Project Phoenix, mounted on a polished base. The card read, "For your new home office." A reminder that the best innovations come from understanding both where we're going and where we've been. Catherine. Mike placed it carefully on his desk, next to the family photos he'd brought from the old house. The contrast between the sleek model and the worn photographs seemed to perfectly capture his life now, a bridge between two worlds. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "You know what's weird? This place already feels more like home than I expected." Mike understood what she meant. Despite its size and modern amenities, they'd managed to make it theirs. His old tools hung in the garage alongside the new ones. Claire's favorite reading chair sat in the living room, reupholstered, but still comfortable. Even his father's ancient desk had found a place in his home office. "It's not about the space," he said. "It's about what we bring to it." The morning. Sun caught the model car's surface, sending patterns dancing across the wall. From this angle, you could see how the biomimetic cooling system integrated perfectly with the vehicle's lines. Practical function, embracing innovative form. "Dad?" Sarah's voice had that tone that meant she was about to say something important. "I'm really proud of you. Taking this chance, starting over, it was brave." Mike thought about the past few months, the challenges, the victories, the moments of doubt and triumph. He thought about his father's legacy, not just preserved, but growing in new directions. About Claire's dreams for their daughter, now becoming reality. Not brave, he corrected gently, just finally ready to see what was possible. The house keys felt lighter in his hand now, more familiar. Like his new life, they were becoming a natural part of who he was, not replacing the old, but adding to it, expanding it, making it richer. Sarah hugged him quickly before heading out to meet friends. "Don't forget dinner with Catherine tonight. And please, wear the new suit she helped you pick out." Mike smiled, watching his daughter leave. Some changes he was discovering were easier to embrace than others. The prototype failure report lay heavy on Mike's desk, its red cover like a warning flag. Project Phoenix's first full systems test had ended in a spectacular failure, with thermal runaway cascading through the innovative cooling system he'd designed. Millions of dollars in damage, months of work destroyed, and the worst part, no clear explanation why. "The board wants answers," Catherine said, her usual composure showing cracks of concern. "The shareholders' meeting is in 3 days. Mike spread the diagnostic data across his workstation. Everything looked perfect on paper, all the simulations, all the component tests. Yet somehow, when they'd pushed the prototype to full power, the whole system had collapsed. "Give me time," he said, not looking up from the reports. "I need to hear what the car's trying to tell us." Emily and Marcus hovered nearby, their faces drawn with worry. They'd all staked their reputations on this design. "The preliminary investigation suggests the biomimetic channels failed under full load," Marcus reported, his tablet displaying thermal camera footage of the breakdown. The heat distribution pattern became chaotic instead of following the predicted paths. Mike watched the footage again, something nagging at the edge of his consciousness. The failure pattern seemed familiar somehow. "Show me the material stress tests again," he requested. Emily pulled up the data. "Everything passed certification. We triple-checked every specification." "That's the problem," Mike muttered, more to himself than the others. "We're still thinking in specifications." He grabbed his old tool roll, the one he'd brought from the garage, and began laying out his worn gauges and diagnostic tools alongside the high-tech equipment. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked. "Something my father taught me. When everything looks right but nothing works, go back to basics." Mike approached the damaged prototype, running his hands along the cooling channels. The metal told a story his instruments couldn't. Microscopic variations in texture, subtle differences in heat retention. "Emily, what's the thermal expansion coefficient of the composite material?" She rattled off the number immediately. "And did we account for material memory under repeated stress?" A pause. "Material memory?" Mike nodded, the puzzle pieces beginning to fall into place. "Every material remembers. Each time it heats and cools, it develops patterns, preferences. We designed the perfect system, but we didn't give it time to learn its own rhythm." He grabbed his notebook, sketching rapidly. "Look here. In a traditional engine, the block develops its own thermal patterns over time. We call it breaking in. But we expected our system to perform perfectly from the first full power cycle." Understanding dawned in Emily's eyes. "We needed a gradual power increase, a learning curve for the materials themselves." "Exactly," Mike turned to Catherine. "The design isn't flawed. It's actually too perfect. We need to let it develop its own character, like breaking in a new engine." "Can you prove it?" Catherine asked. Mike looked at the damaged prototype, then at his team. "Give me 48 hours and a new test unit. We'll run it at increasing power levels. Let the materials establish their patterns naturally." Catherine checked her watch. "The board meets in 72 hours. You're sure about this?" "As sure as I've ever been about anything." He met her gaze steadily. "Sometimes you have to trust the machine to find its own way." The next 2 days became a blur of incremental tests, careful measurements, and constant monitoring. Mike barely left the lab, catching naps on the break room couch. Emily and Marcus stayed with him, their initial skepticism giving way to growing excitement as the data confirmed his theory. The new prototype, gradually introduced to its full power capacity, performed exactly as Mike had predicted. The biomimetic channels developed their own optimal flow patterns, more efficient than their original design specifications. "It's like watching evolution in action," Emily marveled, reviewing the final test results. "The system isn't just working, it's better than our original projections." The failure report still sat on Mike's desk, but now it was accompanied by a new document, a comprehensive analysis of how materials adapt and learn under real-world conditions. It would revolutionize not just Project Phoenix, but their entire approach to testing and implementation. Catherine arrived just as they were completing the final validation tests. She watched in silence as the prototype performed flawlessly at full power. "The board meets in 4 hours, she said finally. "Think you can explain this in terms they'll understand?" Mike smiled, thinking of all the times he'd had to explain. "Complex repairs to customers in his old garage. I'll tell them what my father always told me. Sometimes you have to let things break in naturally. You can't rush perfection." The failure report had become more than a record of disaster. It was now a roadmap to a deeper understanding of how innovation really worked. Sometimes, Mike realized, you had to fail forward to find the right path. Mike's hand-drawn solution covered the entire whiteboard, an elegant blend of old-world mechanics and cutting-edge technology. What had started as a crisis response had evolved into something revolutionary, a completely new approach to material adaptation in electric vehicles. "It's like teaching a car to dance," he explained to the gathered engineers. "You don't start with complicated moves. You begin with basic steps. Let the partners learn each other's rhythms. Emily was already translating his rough sketches into CAD models, her fingers flying across her tablet. The three-dimensional rendering took shape above their heads. A system that didn't just manage heat and power, but actually learned from its own operation. The breakthrough wasn't solving the failure, Marcus added, pointing to the thermal data. It was understanding that what we saw as failure was actually the system trying to tell us something. Catherine stood at the back of the room, watching. Might command the attention of engineers with decades more formal education. His confidence had grown over the past week, ever since his intuitive understanding of materials had turned potential disaster into opportunity. Show them the stress test results, Mike prompted. Emily pulled up the comparison charts. The difference was stunning. Vehicles using the new adaptive systems showed performance improvements of nearly 60% over their original design. By letting the materials develop their own patterns, Mike continued, we're not just preventing failures, we're allowing the whole system to optimize itself in ways we never imagined. One of the senior engineers raised his hand. But what about manufacturing consistency? Every unit will develop slightly different patterns. Mike smiled. Exactly. Just like every traditional engine develops its own character. But here's the beautiful part. He flipped the whiteboard, revealing another set of drawings. We can map those patterns, learn from them, and use that data to improve the next generation. The room buzzed with excitement as the implications became clear. They weren't just building better electric vehicles, they were creating machines that could teach them how to build even better ones. Think about it, Mike said, picking up a piece. Of the original failed prototype, every material has memory, every system develops patterns. Instead of fighting that, we're going to work with it. Let the materials tell us what they need. He moved to the test bay, where the latest prototype hummed contentedly. Listen to her now. Really listen. The vehicle's operation was nearly silent, but there was a harmony to it, a sense of everything working in perfect concert. The old prototype fought itself, Emily observed. This one, it's like it's found its natural rhythm. Mike nodded. Because we stopped trying to force it to be perfect from the start. We gave it time to learn, to adapt, to find its own balance. Catherine finally stepped forward. The board is meeting again tomorrow. They want to discuss expanding this approach across all our projects. The announcement sent a ripple of excitement through the team. What had started as a crisis response could revolutionize their entire development process. Later, after the others had left, Mike stood alone with his whiteboard. His rough drawings looked almost primitive next to the sophisticated 3D models, but they'd bridged a crucial gap between theory and practice. Your father would be proud, Catherine said softly, joining him. You've done more than solve a problem. You've changed how we think about innovation itself. Mike traced the flow lines in his diagram. Dad always said every machine has a soul. The trick is learning to listen to it. He turned to her. I never understood exactly what he meant until now. And now I realize he was talking about respect. Respecting the materials, the natural forces, the way things want to work. All this technology. He gestured at the lab equipment. It's amazing, but without understanding the basic nature of what we're working with, it's just complicated ways of making the same old mistakes. Catherine studied the whiteboard. You've given us more than a solution, Mike. You've given us a new philosophy. The prototype continued its quiet operation, each system learning and adapting, finding its optimal patterns. In its gentle hum, Mike heard echoes of every engine he'd ever listened to, every problem he'd diagnosed by ear and intuition. Not new, he corrected, just remembered. Sometimes the best way forward is to listen to what the past has been trying to tell us all along. His hand-drawn solution would soon be translated into precise technical specifications, but its heart would remain the same, a bridge between experience and innovation, between tradition and progress, between the wisdom of the past and the possibilities of the future. The magazine cover propped against Mike's workstation seemed to belong to another world. The future of innovation, how a small-town mechanic revolutionized electric vehicle design. The photo showed him in his element, surrounded by both high-tech equipment and traditional tools, the Project Phoenix prototype gleaming in the background. "They did capture your good side," Emily teased, dropping the latest test results on his desk. "Though they left out the part about you falling asleep in the break room during the crisis week," Mike chuckled, still uncomfortable with the attention. The article had gone viral, capturing the public's imagination with its story of practical wisdom, transforming cutting-edge technology. Since its publication, Pierce Technologies' stock had soared, and interview requests poured in daily. "Have you seen the applications for the training center?" Catherine asked, entering with a thick folder. "We've had to expand the program before it even opens." Inside were letters from aspiring mechanics and engineers across the country, all drawn by the promise of learning both traditional skills and future technology. The Henderson Technical Training Center had become a symbol of bridging the gap between old and new. "This one's interesting," Catherine said, pulling out a particular application. A master mechanic from Detroit, 20 years experience with conventional engines, wants to learn about electric vehicles to keep his skills relevant. Mike nodded, understanding completely. "Like me 6 months ago. Except you didn't just learn about the technology," Emily pointed out. "You transformed it. The morning's project meeting brought more validation. The adaptive systems approach had been successfully implemented across 3 other vehicle platforms, each showing the same remarkable improvements in efficiency and performance. The really exciting part," Marcus reported, pulling up the latest data, "is how each vehicle develops its own optimal patterns. They're like fingerprints, unique to each unit but following universal principles." Mike's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Dad, my professor just used your adaptive systems paper as a case study in advanced engineering. So weird seeing your name in my textbook." Pride warmed his chest. His daughter was thriving at MIT, her natural brilliance enhanced by the practical knowledge she'd absorbed growing up in the garage. She was already talking about improvements to his original design. "Mr. Henderson," a young intern appeared at his door. "There's a call for you. It's the National Engineering Academy." Catherine's eyes widened. "Already? That's faster than expected." "What's faster than expected?" Mike asked, suspicious. "They want to discuss your nomination for the Innovation Impact Award." She held up a hand to stop his protest. "And before you say you're just a mechanic solving problems, remember that's exactly why you deserve this recognition." The afternoon brought a film crew from a leading technology program, eager to document the Henderson method, as it was now being called. Mike led them through the lab, explaining how traditional mechanical wisdom could enhance modern innovation. "It's not about choosing between old and new," he explained to the cameras. "It's about understanding the fundamental principles that haven't changed, even as the technology has evolved." He demonstrated with the latest prototype, showing how the adaptive systems learned and improved with use, just like a well-maintained traditional engine. "Every vehicle tells a story," he continued, falling into the natural rhythm of teaching that had served him well in the garage. "Our job is to listen, to understand, and to work with the materials rather than trying to force them into our preconceived ideas." The filming was interrupted by an urgent call from the testing facility. Another breakthrough, the adaptive principles were showing promising results in energy storage systems, potentially revolutionizing battery technology. "Your idea is spreading," Catherine observed as they reviewed the new data. "It's not just about vehicles anymore. Other industries are starting to take notice." Mike thought about his father's small garage, about all the lessons learned there that were now influencing the future of technology. The magazine cover caught his eye again, not for his own photo, but for what it represented. The value of experience, the importance of understanding fundamentals, the bridge between past and future. We're getting interest from aerospace, Catherine continued. They want to discuss applying your material memory principles to their new propulsion systems. The day ended with a video call to Sarah, sharing the latest developments. She was already sketching improvements, her mind racing ahead to new possibilities. "You've started something big, Dad," she said proudly. "Something that's going to change everything." Looking around his workstation, at the blend of old tools and new technology, Mike realized she was right. But the real achievement wasn't in the magazine covers or awards. It was in building a bridge between two worlds, proving that progress didn't mean abandoning the wisdom of experience. The prototype hummed quietly in its bay, each system learning, adapting, improving, just like the man who had taught them how to listen to what machines had been trying to tell them all along. 2 concert tickets lay on Mike's desk, an invitation and a question wrapped in glossy paper. Catherine had left them there, with a simple note, "Portland Symphony Orchestra, Saturday night, if you're interested." The casual wording didn't hide the weight of the gesture. This would be something different from their usual working dinners. Mike picked up the tickets, remembering how Claire had loved classical music. She'd tried for years to educate his ear, teaching him to appreciate the complex harmonies she heard so easily. Now, looking at these tickets, he felt a familiar twist of guilt mixed with something new. Possibility. "Dad?" Sarah's voice came through his office speaker. She was video, calling from MIT. "You're doing that overthinking thing again, aren't you?" "How can you tell?" "Because I know that face. It's the same one you had when Mom first got sick and you didn't know what to do." Mike sat back, studying his daughter's image on the screen. Sometimes she was so much like Claire it took his breath away. "Catherine left concert tickets on my desk," he admitted. Sarah's eyes lit up. "Finally! I was wondering when one of you would make a move." "It's not that simple, sweetheart." "Why not? Mom's been gone 3 years, Dad. She'd want you to be happy." Mike touched his wedding ring, a habit he hadn't quite broken. "I am happy. The work, the new life we've built, that's not the same, and you know it." Sarah leaned closer to her camera. "Remember what Mom always said about engines? A machine can run perfectly and still be missing something essential." "Exactly. You've got this amazing new life, this incredible career, but you're still running on 3 cylinders, Dad." Mike laughed despite himself. "Using car metaphors against me? That's fighting dirty. Learned from the best." Her expression softened. Catherine's. "Good for you, Dad. Anyone can see it. The way you work together, the way you complement each other, even the way you argue about design principles. It's like watching 2 halves of the same brain." He glanced at the tickets again. The symphony was performing Beethoven's 9th, Claire's. "A favorite. What if I'm not ready?" "What if you are and you're just scared?" Sarah countered. "Mom didn't love you because you were perfect. She loved you because you were brave enough to try new things, to grow, to change." Through his office windows, Mike could see Catherine in the test bay, discussing something with the engineering team. She moved with confidence, but there was a gentleness to her leadership that reminded him of Claire's way with her music students. "Did I ever tell you about the night I met your mother?" he asked. "Only about 1,000 times." Sarah smiled. "The broken-down piano van outside your first garage." She was so angry about missing her concert. Then somehow, by the time I finished fixing the van, we'd talked for hours about everything and nothing. He paused, remembering. She said later that she knew right then, not because I fixed the van, but because I listened to her, to the engine, to the possibility of something unexpected and wonderful. And now... Mike watched Catherine laugh at something Marcus said, the sound carrying faintly through the glass. Over the months, he'd learned to listen to her too, to her vision for the company, her passion for innovation, her quiet wisdom about people and potential. Now, he picked up the tickets. Now maybe it's time to listen to something new, Sarah beamed. "That's my dad. Oh, make sure you wear that charcoal suit she helped you pick out, and maybe get a haircut. Now you sound like your mother." "Good. Someone has to." She glanced off screen. "I've got to run. Lab project due. But Dad, I'm really proud of you." After the call ended, Mike sat holding the tickets, feeling the weight of change and possibility. Through his window, he saw Catherine heading toward his office. "I hope I wasn't too presumptuous," she said from the doorway, gesturing at the tickets. "I just remembered you mentioning that your wife loved classical music." The consideration. In that detail, the attention to his past while offering a future touched him deeply. "Not presumptuous," he replied. "Though I should warn you, Claire spent 15 years trying to teach me about classical music. I'm still not sure I know my Bach from my Beethoven." Catherine smiled, and in that smile Mike saw understanding, patience, and something more, a reflection of his own readiness to try again. "Well then," she said, "maybe we can figure it out together." The tickets felt lighter in his hand now, like possibilities instead of obligations. Sometimes, he realized, the hardest part of moving forward was giving yourself permission to take the first step. The new family photo album sat open on Mike's coffee table, its pages a chronicle of transformation. The latest edition showed him and Catherine at the symphony, both dressed elegantly, their expressions caught in shared laughter. Next to it was a snapshot from Sarah's first day at her Pierce Technologies internship, her MIT credentials proudly displayed alongside her old Henderson's auto repair work shirt. "These came out pretty well," Catherine said, adding photos from the training center's opening ceremony. The images showed Mike teaching a diverse group of students, his hands moving expressively as he explained the principles of adaptive systems. "Hard to believe it's only been 8 months," Mike replied, studying the progression of pictures. Each page told a story of growth, of worlds merging, of new possibilities taking shape. Sarah burst through the front door, her tablet cluttered with design specifications. "Dad, Catherine, you have to see this." She spread her work across the coffee table, covering the photo album. "I think I found a way to apply your material memory principles to quantum computing systems." Mike exchanged an amused glance with Catherine. Sarah's enthusiasm was infectious, her brilliant mind constantly finding new applications for his practical insights. "Show us," Catherine encouraged, making room among the photos and papers. As Sarah explained her theory, Mike marveled at how naturally they had all fallen into this new family dynamic. Catherine's analytical mind complemented Sarah's innovative spirit, while his practical experience grounded their theoretical flights. "The quantum processors generate heat patterns just like engines," Sarah explained. "If we apply Dad's adaptive cooling principles at the nanoscale—" A knock at the door interrupted her presentation. Emily and Marcus stood outside, carrying takeout containers from their favorite Thai restaurant. "Emergency breakthrough meeting?" Emily asked, spotting Sarah's scattered papers. "More like a family brainstorming session," Catherine replied. "Come, join us." The living room filled with the comfortable chaos of shared meals and shared ideas. Emily and Marcus had become more than colleagues. They were part of this extended family that had grown around innovation and understanding. "Oh, before I forget," Marcus said between bites of pad thai, "the first batch of adaptive system vehicles is ready for public release. The press is calling it the biggest breakthrough in electric vehicle technology since Tesla." Mike thought about the journey that had brought them here. From his small garage to this moment, from fixing individual cars to transforming an industry. Yet somehow he'd managed to keep the best of both worlds. "Speaking of breakthroughs," Catherine added, "the aerospace contract is official. They want to start implementing your principles in their new generation of engines." Sarah pulled up more designs on her tablet. "And with my quantum computing adaptation—" "One innovation at a time, sweetheart," Mike laughed. "Let your old dad keep up." The evening flowed with easy conversation, technical discussions blending seamlessly with personal stories. Emily shared news about her younger brother enrolling in the training center's first advanced class. Marcus talked about his grandmother's pride in seeing his name on the adaptive systems patents. As the night wore on, Mike found himself standing by the window, taking in the scene. Catherine joined him, her hand finding his. "Penny for your thoughts?" He gestured to the room, to this family brought together by an unexpected chain of events. Just thinking about how things adapt and find their natural patterns, not just machines. Through the window, he could see the lights of Portland, the city that had become home. In the distance, the Pierce Technologies campus glowed softly, while closer to downtown, the Henderson Technical Training Center was preparing for another day of bridging past and future. "Sarah's quantum computing idea is brilliant," Catherine observed. "She has your intuition for how things want to work. And her mother's talent for music," Mike added. "She sees patterns where others see chaos." The photo album still lay open on the coffee table, surrounded by Sarah's technical drawings and empty takeout containers. The contrast struck him as perfect somehow. The documentation of their personal journey mixed with the evidence of their ongoing professional adventure. "You know what Claire would say about all this," he said softly. Catherine squeezed his hand. "What?" "She'd say it's like a symphony, all these different parts finding harmony together." Sarah called them back to the table, eager to share another insight. As they rejoined the group, Mike felt the truth of his own words. They had all found their rhythm together, creating something both beautiful and innovative. The photos captured the moments, but it was the spaces between them, the daily victories, the shared challenges, the quiet understandings that told the real story of how life could transform while staying true to its essential nature. The renovated garage gleamed in the morning sun, its familiar bones wrapped in new possibility. The original Henderson's Auto Repair sign had been restored to its former glory, now hanging above a modern glass entrance that read Henderson Technical Training Center. Standing before it, Mike ran his fingers over his father's hand-painted lettering, feeling the generations of craftsmanship connecting past to future. "Ready for the first official class?" Catherine asked, joining him outside. Inside, the transformation was even more striking. Modern diagnostic equipment shared space with traditional tools, each workstation designed to teach both time-tested skills and cutting-edge technology. The old hydraulic lift had been rebuilt rather than replaced, its well-worn surface now a testament to the durability of good design. "Mr. Henderson?" A young woman approached, wearing the center's new uniform, a modern design that incorporated the same deep blue of his old work shirts. "I'm Lisa Chen, first-year student. Your father fixed my grandfather's cars here." Mike smiled, remembering. "Thomas Chen, the green Volvo wagon. You remember? Every car tells a story," Mike said, the familiar words carrying new meaning. "Your grandfather understood that. He always asked about the repairs, wanted to learn. More students filtered in, a diverse group ranging from experienced mechanics looking to update their skills to young engineers seeking practical experience. Each workstation had both a traditional engine and an electric vehicle system, allowing students to understand the principles that connected them. Sarah arrived with Emily and Marcus, carrying boxes of materials for their guest lecture on adaptive systems. The sight of his daughter preparing to teach in the same space where she had first learned to hold a wrench filled Mike with quiet pride. "Dad, look what we found in the old storage room." Sarah held up a faded photograph, Mike and his father, standing proudly before the garage on its opening day. She had it framed alongside a recent photo of Mike with the Pierce Technologies team, the two images bridging decades of progress. The first class gathered, their faces eager and uncertain. Mike stepped to the front of the room, feeling the weight of both tradition and innovation. "Welcome to the Henderson Technical Training Center," he began. "Some of you might wonder why we kept the old tools, why we insist on teaching traditional mechanics alongside the latest technology. He picked up a worn wrench from his father's old toolbox, because understanding where we've been is crucial to knowing where we're going. Catherine joined him, adding, "The future of transportation isn't about abandoning what works, it's about building on proven principles to create something better." The morning unfolded like a carefully orchestrated dance between past and present. Students learned to diagnose problems both by computer and by ear, to trust both data and instinct. Mike moved between workstations, sharing stories that connected theoretical knowledge to practical experience. During lunch, old Mr. Peterson stopped by, his faithful Buick still running thanks to years of Mike's care. The students gathered around as Mike used it to demonstrate how mechanical principles remained constant even as technology evolved. "The materials change, the systems advance," he explained. "But the basic truth remains. Everything has a natural way of working. Our job is to understand it, respect it, and help it work better." Sarah's presentation on adaptive systems drew gasps of amazement, especially when she revealed how the principles had evolved from Mike's years of practical experience. The students saw firsthand how innovation could grow from traditional wisdom. Later, as the day wound down, Mike found himself in his old office. The space had been converted into a research lab, but they'd kept his father's desk, now holding both vintage repair manuals and cutting-edge technical documents. "Your father would be proud," Catherine said softly, finding him there. "Not just of the center, but of how you've honored his legacy while building something new." Mike touched the desk's worn surface, feeling the years of work and wisdom it had witnessed. He always said a good mechanic never stops learning. I don't think he imagined anything quite like this, though. Through the window, he could see the students leaving, their conversations animated with new knowledge and possibilities. The old garage had found its new purpose, becoming a bridge between experience and innovation, just as he had. "Sometimes," he said, "the best way forward is to remember where you started." The renovated garage stood as proof that progress didn't mean abandoning tradition. It meant building on it, learning from it, allowing it to evolve naturally into something both familiar and revolutionary. The sunrise view from Mike's new office at Pierce Technologies painted the sky in shades of promise. 1 year had passed since that rainy day, when a broken-down Mercedes changed everything. The wall-to-wall windows offered a panoramic view of both the sprawling technology campus and, in the distance, the Henderson Technical Training Center, its newly installed solar panels gleaming in the morning light, taking in the view. Catherine's voice carried a warmth that had nothing to do with business. Their relationship had grown naturally, like one of his adaptive systems finding its optimal pattern. "Just thinking about all the things that had to go wrong to make everything go right," he replied, turning to face her. The morning's news was displayed on his tablet. Pierce Technologies' adaptive vehicle systems had just won the National Innovation Award, the first time the prestigious honor had gone to a project combining traditional mechanical wisdom with cutting-edge technology. "Sarah's flight lands at noon," Catherine reminded him. "She's excited to show us her quantum computing adaptation." "Results," Mike smiled, proud of how his daughter had blazed her own trail while staying connected to her roots. Her MIT professors had been amazed by her unique perspective, the combination of theoretical brilliance and hands-on experience that came from growing up in a garage. The training center had exceeded all expectations. Its first class of graduates was already making waves in the industry, bringing a new approach to innovation that respected both tradition and progress. Old Mr. Peterson's grandson was among them, carrying forward a legacy of his own. "The aerospace prototype results came in," Catherine said, pulling up the data. "Your principles work even better at high altitude. They want to fast-track implementation across their entire next-generation fleet." Mike studied the results, seeing, in the numbers and charts, the same basic truths he'd learned from his father. Listen to the machine, respect the materials, understand the natural way of things. These principles had transformed an industry, not by revolutionizing it, but by helping it evolve naturally. His phone buzzed with a message from Emily. The training center students had successfully adapted his material memory concepts to hydrogen. Fuel cells. Another breakthrough, another bridge between old wisdom and new technology. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would make of all this, Mike mused, gazing at the campus below, his old school methods helping shape the future of transportation. He'd understand perfectly, Catherine assured him. After all, he taught you the most important principle. Everything and everyone has a purpose, a natural way of being. Sometimes it just takes the right circumstances to reveal it. Through the window, they watched as the morning shift arrived, engineers and mechanics, theorists, and practitioners all working together to create something new. The barriers between theoretical and practical knowledge had dissolved, replaced by a deeper understanding of how innovation really worked. Sarah's latest designs hung on the office wall beside his father's old repair manual. The juxtaposition no longer seemed strange. It was a perfect representation of how progress worked best, building on foundations of experience to reach new heights. "Ready for the board meeting?" Catherine asked. "They want to discuss expanding the training center, a model nationwide." Mike nodded, gathering his materials. His presentation would emphasize what he'd learned over this transformative year, that the future belonged to those who could bridge worlds, who could see the value in both experience and innovation, who understood that progress was about evolution rather than revolution. The morning sun climbed higher, its light touching both the gleaming technology campus and the distant training center. Like the adaptive systems he'd helped create, Mike had found his own optimal pattern, a life that honored its roots while reaching for new possibilities. As they headed to the meeting, Mike caught his reflection in the window. He saw not just the successful innovator or the experienced mechanic, but something more, a man who had learned that the best futures are built on well-maintained foundations, and that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply listening to what life, machines, and hearts have been trying to tell us all along.